It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
We want to remind you, if you are trying to be on this journey, if you are trying to get to financial independence, at least by our estimation, in our opinion, financial independence really boils down to one variable, and that variable is consumption. How much do you spend, or how much does it take for you to be able to live the lifestyle that you want to live for the rest of your life? Financial independence is being able to consume in the way that you want to without someone else dictating what you have to do with your time.
Well, consumption, you better know what you're spending. I mean, and I think this is the big part of it, is because you have to know what makes you happy. I mean, that's one of the things. We have some content coming up where we're going to talk about when is it okay to spend. And I think anybody who's got a very aggressive strategy that they want to leave the workforce early, you can't skip any steps on the homework. And consumption's a big part of that. But you first need to kind of know, what is the vision you're trying to create? Because, Bo, there's very minimalistic people out there.
Sure.
I've watched all type of content where people are essentially living the van life. And then I've also seen people who are saying, no, I don't want any compromises. I'm just going to go work in the highest paying career I can.
Sure.
So I have the biggest shovel possible, but I'm going to save a ton of it so that I don't cut my consumption or my lifestyle at all when I hit retirement.
Yeah, you're actually getting into some of the different strains of FIRE that exist. And what's so common amongst all these strains, and we'll talk about them, is that in order to know what your number is, and your number being that magical thing that you have to hit to be able to actually hit financial independence, you have to have a beat on consumption. But consumption is not the same for everyone. That's exactly what you're alluding to, Brian. There are different strains of FIRE, like there's Barista FIRE. This is the idea that you want to be financially independent while using a part-time job for additional income or supplemental income or maybe health insurance benefits. Then there's Lean FIRE. I feel like this one gets a lot of the press. These are the folks who want to be as frugal as possible. These are the minimalists who want to get their spending down as low as they can. They're collecting, ketchup packets at the fast food restaurant, that type of idea, so that they can consume as little as possible. And then there's this third strain, and I think this is probably the one that we resonate with the most, Brian, and this is what the majority of our clients look like, whether they're part of the retire early camp or not. Those, and most often that we interact with, that want to achieve financial independence would be classified as fat FIRE. What they desire is for their standard of living in financial independence to match their standard of living while they're working. They don't necessarily want to have to cut back or pare back or have to work more. They truly want their Army of Dollar bills to work just as hard as they worked while they were in the workforce.
So I think the first thing we have to kind of make sure we are respecting and doing well is budgeting.
Yep,
I know nobody wants to hear that, but I don't even think you can consider yourself part of this unless you've done the homework of knowing actually what's coming in, what's going out, what are you actually spending, because you can't, and you said it earlier, you can't know your number.
That's
you can't plan for it unless you actually know what your burn rate is, what the spending is. Do not skip that step. I want you to actually, I don't care if you have to use worksheets. I don't care if you have to use, you need a budget. There's mobile apps now that make this easy. Do not skip the budgeting step.
So if consumption is what defines financial independence, then savings and investing is what defines the timeline. How quickly you're able to get there is really a function of your savings rate. How committed to this goal can you be? And so we thought it'd be really interesting to lay out sort of a case study, what investing more can do for you. And so we have two potential FIRE proponents. We have Steady Steve, and then we have Fire Felicia, who's really committed. They both make $100,000 a year. Steady Steve wants to invest 20% of his gross income for retirement. That's kind of like this tried and true steady idea of saving. Fire Felicia knows that in order to retire early, she has to save more so that she can get there sooner. So she invests 40% of her gross income for retirement. Let's assume that they both earn the same rate of return, and let's be very, very conservative. Let's say that they earn 6% annually over the time that they're trying to commit to this savings goal. The question you have is, how soon can they reach financial independence? Well, first, you have to define what is financial independence. So we looked at three different standards of living: 60% of their pre-retirement income, 80% of their pre-retirement income, and then 100%. Well, if you look at those two savings rates, 20% versus 40%, Steady Steve takes 28 and a half years to get to financial independence. Fire Felicia, who's saving twice as much, gets there in under 20 years.
Wow.
In order to replace 80% of their pre-retirement income, Steady Steve has to work for 32 years to do that. Fire Felicia only has to work for about 23 years to get there. And then finally, if you want to be part of like Fat Fire, you want 100% of your post-retirement income to match 100% of your pre-retirement income, it takes Steady Steve about 35 years, a full working career to get there. Fire Felicia is able to do it in 26. Your savings rate matters.
So that's where I guess the sacrifice or the discipline really comes in. And I guess you put an asterisk or a boldface as the part of the FIRE movement is these are people dedicated. These are people that are really pushing hard on, hey, can I really defer as much gratification, save, invest as much as possible so I hopefully can control my life and my variables much sooner in the process.
Now, I want to pause for a moment, Brian. I want to go a little bit off script here and talk about this because one of the great things that you've done for me in my life, when I've been super motivated, super driven, had this idea that I wanted to save a ton, you always say, hey, it's important, slow down and smell the roses. Slow down to take in what's going on right now. And I do worry with some of our FIRE folks, perhaps they might not recognize the cost associated with this kind of behavior. You want to speak to that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's pretty common, achiever mentalities. Because from a young age, people who are wired to be this disciplined, you're probably constantly going through mental checklists. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I got to hurry up and get through this list so I can get to the next list. And we all just know that happiness is just right over the curve and we can get through this as fast as possible. The problem with that is you're going to recognize you only get your 20s once.
That's
You
right.
only get your 30s, your 40s. And that's what I just don't want people. I want you to look back at all your decades. Take it from somebody who has success, but also gets to look back with fondness over the decade of my 20s and my 30s. It's great. I'm so happy for everybody who's dedicated and disciplined enough to where you really are creating this great, big, beautiful tomorrow for yourself and your family to reach these goals so much earlier than the general public. However, just make sure you're bedazzling your basic life in a way so that you are still traveling, you're still building memories. Because I don't want you to get to 50 or even 45 because you'll figure out really quick. You get very sentimental in your 40s. I don't want you to go look back and go, what was I doing?
Why did I do this?
I'm not going to die broke. I'm so disciplined. I've invested so much that, but I do respect. I think it's incredible that people are building independence because I can tell you this. Life is fun when you have kind of done the steps early so that you actually get to control where you're doing things. And here's the thing. I think it's liberating. I think I have had more success because I now get to make decisions that are not necessarily monetarily driven. They can be more purpose driven. And that's really opened it up to where I can take some crazy risks that I don't think the typical person can do because they're tied to the paycheck to pay the bills.